good morning, everybody. Welcome to another morning's live stream here to promote my Kickstarter for Where's Itsy Bitsy Spider, a search and find book about a teeny little spider. He goes traveling all over England and comes to San Francisco, and we have to find Itsy Bitsy and his 10 fairy tale friends in every scene. Sort of scene here, and today to help talk about comics and cartooning is my good friend Mr. Jonathan Lemon. Well, he's there. I think he's a little frozen up right now. Hopefully he'll join us and try turning it off and on again, Jonathan. And also here's Dale Sipperley and Chris Porrow. I guess I'm going to play the theme tune, and hopefully Lemon will be with us when we're back.
I'm just going up this water spout, y'all. Y'all, hope it don't rain.
The itsy bitsy spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. So the itsy bitsy spider climbed up the spout again.
I'm just going up this water spout, y'all. Hope it don't rain. I'm an itsy bitsy spider. I'm also a good hider. Y'all ain't gonna find me.
The itsy bitsy spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. So the itsy bitsy spider climbed up the spout again.
Going up this
Up the spout again.
going up this
Up the spout again.
Well, we lost Lemon there.
Oh,
Well,
well,
he's
was
great
he go by
guest.
Lemon or Jonathan? Which
He's
which
one of those
does he
guests
go
that
by?
lets you get a word in edgeways. I'm just talking all the time. All right.
Wait, what is-
It's crashed in spectacular fashion. Okay.
I see
okay.
Jonathan back.
He's back again. All right. Hello.
You just have to let him in.
He's back again. Hello.
Technology, huh?
Yes. I don't know. I'm using Chrome on my iMac, but I'm told if you're on mobile, Safari on iPhone and Chrome on Android. Otherwise,
Run Chrome.
It's looped. It started looping as you. To make sure I understand, they're a little harder than the finding the spider on the front page, right? The cover.
yes.
Very quickly.
Yeah, he's very big on the front page, but inside he's very tiny.
Okay.
Let's
It'd be
see.
hilarious if he wasn't. If he was that size all the way
Probably
through the
I'll
book.
find him now and show him to you. But yeah, he also appears at the top of every page. So, for example, on this page, there, can you see him? The camera doesn't quite focus. He's in there in the middle somewhere.
Don't
Oh, yeah.
show people where the spider is. They won't buy the book.
Spoiler alert.
I feel like
Well, it's
that's
not
what
just
happened
spider.
so
If
many
you find
times.
the spider, if you find the spider too easy, there's the princess and the pea, and you have to find the pea on every page. So that's the really hard. That's for the people who want to find something really hard.
Not to mention the endless sheep.
All right. So, Mr. Jonathan Lemon, you're drinking your yerba mate there.
I
Very
am.
good, drinking it properly. I do drink yerba mate a little bit out of a teacup. I don't have a proper gourd for it.
Ah. I have several hundred. So next time you're over, you can borrow one along with my.
Oh, okay.
hair.
Well, I've already got your hair clippers, which I put to good use. Sweet. Yeah, basically, I just go out all things. That's how it works. The regular cartoonists go and borrow off the syndicated cartoonists. I get all Lemon's hand-me-downs.
It's a good system.
All right, so yes, Lemon's achieved the pinnacle of cartooning achievement there. You're slaving away, drawing 2 strips every day. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, and those 2 strips are Alley Oop, which is a syndicated legacy strip that's been around since what year was Alley Oop started?
1933. It was first syndicated, and it lasted about 3 months, and then the syndicate went bankrupt, Bonnet Brown, and then it was picked up again, and it's been running ever since. So it's the 6th longest running comic strip that's currently running.
Yes, well,
I
that's
think
amazing, isn't it? And
Ashley
it's a
Alley's
good idea. So I
and-
often think of a time traveling caveman. Oh, you would think that's a good idea, and then you're like, okay, Ali, you already did it. So you have a lot of, you can go through all of time and history, and you're working with the wonderful writer.
Yes, the wonderful Joey Allison Sayers, Oakland native. She's absolutely wonderful. And yes, so that's good because I don't know if I could write and draw 2 strips a day.
Yes,
Like,
and so yes, and then your own
write
strip
and
is
draw one and then draw, because the writing takes an amazing amount of time. You wouldn't think so, but it's certainly for me, it's pretty
yes.
time consuming. I can knock out an actual drawing of a strip in 20 minutes, half an hour, but the actual writing part takes much longer than you'd think.
Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah, that
yes,
is
so you
surprising.
spend a lot of time on writing. So your own strip is Rabbits Against Magic,
Mhm.
and so you write and draw that one. So yeah, so how long does writing a strip typically take you? I'm sure it varies from day to day, but
I like to think that you don't sit down and write. That never works. So they
No.
just they're floating. Ideas are floating around, and you kind of just grab them when they just occur to you. And I think you have to train your brain to constantly process. So that means you never fully relax, and you're always like just in back of your mind, even if you're not thinking about comics. You're processing everything like you could be finding an idea.
yes. So do you keep? I mean, you have a mobile phone. I mean, do you record ideas on that, or do you have a notebook that you carry around at all times by your bed when you wake up at 3 a.m. with an idea or something?
The phone has definitely taken over the note taking. Yeah, writing notes at 4 or 5 in the morning. Although that's often when the best ideas come. I found that when you're half asleep, like either going to sleep or just waking up, your brain is going in these strange directions, and you can think of things, and they're not always the best idea in the cold light of day, but that's definitely where your mind wanders best. But yeah, I used to carry all sorts of little notebooks around. I used to have this very nice little hardback one, which was maybe about this big. And it was like, just like your classic black sketchbook. But it was perfect because it would always fit in your top pocket, and you could pull it out and open the hardback as well. It's very nice and thick paper, so you could almost do watercolors on it. And I'd write very, very small, so they would last a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
concentrated notebook. Yes, that sounds good.
I'm not sure if I hate the talking into the air or talking to your phone thing. I'm very poor at that, and even texting, I'll still text even though I know how to do it. In my when I'm in the car, I'll do it, but I hate I feel stupid. I'm too old to be one of these people that's comfortable, walking along the street just talking to myself or doing crazy air gestures and stuff like that.
Yes, I don't mind. Yeah, I can't do it if there's anyone around. If I'm on my own, I'll do it quite happily. But if there's someone can hear me in the other room, I don't.
I just whispered in. Just get really close.
Yeah, well, it does work pretty well right now. Yeah, I had a friend who worked at SRI, the Stanford Research Institute, which is where Siri gets its name, and he's always been on at me to use it more. I don't know, but the thing is, I used Apple speakable items back in the mid 1990s, and that wasn't very successful. So I just, been a bit reluctant, with Siri, but I guess it's better now. All right, so Lemon, what can we talk about? We have. Sorry, what are you saying, Dale?
Buy a phone with a stylus. You won't look crazy talking to yourself. You'll just be writing on your phone.
Yeah, yeah,
and that's better than using a notebook and a pencil because
it's an excuse to spend money.
Dale's very helpful. Dale's here. Dale's a former Apple Genius art supply expert and numerous other skills. Ran a computerware store, so yeah, he'll tell us all about. He'll ask the technical questions.
Excellent.
And give us the technical details. So, okay, I'll ask a Dale-like question. So, what do you use to create your cartoons? How do you work on a Mac with the Cintiq tablet? That's what I use.
You're asking Dale or me?
Well, you, Jonathan. Yes.
Okay.
We're asking
Sorry,
you the question. Yeah.
I'm mesmerized by the
Dale
fairs.
uses Click Studio
I
Paint.
covered the fairs. All I want to talk about right now is fairs, but we'll move on. We'll talk about my process. Yes, I am I guess a fairly recent convert to digital, and that was almost certainly because the constraints of having to produce so many comic strips in such a short space of time. Unbelievably faster to do it digitally. Not necessarily because you have, levels of undo and you don't have to scan, but I found the biggest time-saving part of this is doing pencils, because I refuse to copy and paste artwork and reuse it. I've never done that. I think that's cheating, and I hate it when you see it. It's too perfect, and there's a lot of strips I like that do it, but it rankles me. It feels like cheating. But to be able to do that with pencils, and just to move or enlarge or and then ink over the top and move around or reuse is unbelievably time saving. So and prior to that, I was very much an old school. I used the Bristol board. I was a brush man, not a pen man, but I had all my brushes, and I was experimenting with all these inks. And I did the thing where you leave the top of the ink overnight to make it look slightly thicker and all this stuff. Had all my favorite stuff. But now I look at that stuff now, and it's nice to have the piece of paper with the art on. But I've got bins and bins and bins of these plastic bins. Where's I'm losing my frame here. Plastic bins full of just these. Let's see what we got here. My filing system on the floor down here. This is that's 2 daily strips here on a bit of paper from a few years ago. And I guess you can sell these, which you can't do with digital, and you can smell them and use them as exfoliants and stuff like that. But they have very little purpose, and they do use up a lot of space. I'm always tempted to go to a gymnasium or something and spread out my 4,000 sheets of Rabbits Against Magic, just to have myself in the middle and have a drone take a picture, as it's moving down, and
that's a cool idea.
The full scale of 15 years worth of Rabbits Against Magic strips. But yes, all digital. So yes, I have the Cintiq, and it's ridiculously expensive. It's good though. I got mine 2.5 years ago. I've got through 3 pens already.
You got through the whole pens, or not just the nib? You can just replace the nib.
Yes. No, the pen, for some reason, I had a defective pen, and then they sent a replacement, and then the replacement was defective again, and the third one's lasted 2 years. But yeah, and I tried the felt tip endings, the little felt things.
Yes.
And then went back to the hard plastic. I don't know why I prefer the plastic.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I've used that. Yes. Well, yes, it's a very useful piece of kit. All right. Well, if Dale's got any more technical questions,
what software do you use? Photoshop or Clip Studio Paint or Illustrator or Cricut?
Yes, to all of those. No, I draw in Photoshop, color in Clip Studio, formerly Manga Studio. And that's because all of you guys know that coloring in Photoshop is the worst. I have no idea why. That fill bucket in Clip Studio, where you can just keep it held down and sort of drag it around and it fills everything up, that's a huge time saver too. Because I do a lot of I'm not one of these very clean cartoonists that just everything joins up, and I have a lot of sort of scratchy bits that you can just kind of move the bucket over and it fill everything in.
You don't like the vector layers for inking in Clip Studio Paint? You prefer inking in Photoshop?
Yes. I have more of my favorite brushes in Photoshop, maybe if I explored more.
So you are inking in Photoshop now?
I am. What's that?
Inking in Photoshop?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. But yeah. All right.
I don't know if this is similar, but what I tell people, because I'm more of an audio person, there's a whole bunch of packages. It just depends on which package you get efficient with. So there's probably 20 different audio packages you can work with, and whatever you personally get efficient with is probably the thing you should stick with, and you can get efficient at all of them. So it kind of comes down to that. And the reason that I haven't switched packages for so long is because I'm really fast at in the package that I'm in. It's not that the other packages are bad. So I am not like I do not work visually the way you guys do. I used to be a graphic designer with Chuck, but I don't do it on a daily basis. So I always use Photoshop. I'd imagine there's a bunch of packages.
Well, what I wanted to say was, if you have the latest version of Clip Studio Paint, if you've been upgrading, it will import Photoshop brushes if you want to try that.
Right. The one thing I noticed, it doesn't import the text layers without making them into a raster. So that was,
Clip Studio Paint's terrible for text.
Okay, that's good to know. Well, yeah, this is very interesting. Yes, I don't know. I haven't really tried Clip Studio Paint, but I do. The coloring might be helpful, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I used to be during my search scenes very carefully sort of closing as many shapes as possible to make. But lately, I don't want to do that so much. So yeah, the coloring then gets commensurately harder.
So,
all right. So yes, and Lemon, you're a neighbor of Chris's, more or less. You guys live in the same area in San Francisco, and he's near Presida Park, and you're just at the other side of Chavez there.
I thought you were somewhere far away.
well,
I mean, I don't know why I thought that, because your video froze. I was like, you're in England or something. Yeah, I'm right off Presida Park.
yeah,
We're actually all kind of in the same.
2 blocks away. This is fascinating for everybody else, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Well, I don't know, because Jonathan, you're also a parent. You know, Chris is a parent. We're parents here, raising kids. How does your kid take it to having a dad as a cartoonist? My son's always sort of spectacularly uninterested in the subject.
Yes. Yes, I am the proud owner of a small human child. He's 10, so he's still. I think it's always been normal to him that's what Dad does. He stays downstairs and draws all day. So in his head, that's a great job to have, and I can't tell him enough how it's important to get a job where you meet people and get out the house a bit.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. You haven't been told that you're selfish because you don't have a job that makes more money.
Well, I don't know, because he always asked me, are we rich? Are we rich? And you have to give that very crazy answer that I think my parents gave me. It was, well, we're not rich, we're not poor, but we have enough. And the secret is to live within your means. That's what I always tell him. Live within your means and you'll always be rich.
Yes. Mr. McCorber said it. Earn £20, spend 19. It's this road to happiness. Earn £20 and spend 21. It's the road to misery, or something like that. I'm not quoting it very well, but yes.
Somebody put a number on that. A number on, like, this is where you have to be in America for your needs to be met, and after this number, it's diminishing returns, and certainly at the top of the scale, they're very diminished. But I do not know what that number is.
My
daughter never asked me those
there is
questions.
a number. It was probably gone up a bit. Like about 10 years ago, they were saying it's about sort of £70,000 or £80,000 in America. That's where your happiness will not increase anymore. Your happiness will increase with money up to about, let's say 100,000 income in the US. And then after that, it won't go up anymore. You'll just find more problems. Your happiness needs for money are met. But,
more money, more problems. All right. So what happens if you get to 100,000 and you're not happy? That's got to be depressing. Let's say you work your way up from like 40,000 to. You just need to spend it better.
Yeah,
spend your way to happiness.
Yes. Art supplies and comic books.
Yeah, that's
all right.
That's
that sounds pretty good. Yeah. I like it. What about guitars? Can we throw those in there too? Like audio gear?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. What about you, Lemon?
Ukulele.
We should write a
do you
book.
play any music, Lemon? Are you a musician at all?
I have my ukulele here.
Oh, okay.
I dabble with the accordion.
Another one.
I worked in the music
another one
for many years and was in bands. That was my first job out of art college. But I'm long since over the need for that kind of self-endorsement from adulating crowds.
Could you tell us about your education as an artist and how you ended up being a syndicated cartoonist?
Yes, thank you for asking.
That's a sensible question.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah. So, like I think many people in England around the time I was born and grew up in the 70s, 60s and 70s, there were a lot of comics around, and I was born in a town called Watford, which is oddly enough where all the comics were printed at Odden's Press. And
oh yes, all the printing presses in Watford. Yes.
There's a lot. Yeah, it's famous for beer and printing presses.
Yes.
So that's comics and beer, some odd reason, and also where they made Star Wars, the movie in Pinewood Studios.
Oh yes, of course. Yes, that's around that area. Yes.
And the Harry Potter experience now there.
Oh, is it? Okay. Well, all right. Well,
is that a theme park?
It's the Hollywood of England. Hollywood of England. It's not a thing. It's where they built the studios for Harry Potter, and they just left them up and charged people to go there now. And there's like a train that goes from London, the Hogwarts Express. Talking of I only know about this because I've had to read all the books with my kid.
Well, that was you made that sound like that was a difficult thing.
Were you not a fan?
No, I'm not a fan.
Sorry, put you on the spot.
I'm beginning to realize I'm not a fan of fantasy, and the reason is because it's all based on medieval values, and I think it's the only way these days. The same way people like pirates, because it's the only way you can really like have acceptable dressing up as disabled people. Like have the eye patch and stuff. Yeah. Fantasy is the only acceptable way of having these medieval values like kings and slaves and all these things and killing.
Well, unless we're talking about Star Wars.
Well, I would say Star Wars was science fiction.
Well, it's still medieval.
Yes.
I don't know. You could debate Star Wars with science fiction or fantasy. It's not really science fiction because there's not like everything works by magic really in Star Wars. There's no technology aspect to it. The technology is sort of the Force, and that's very magical. So I don't know. It's more based in myth than mythology. I mean, we've talked about this in Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, as opposed to something like Dune, which is sort of a little bit of both. But Dune is still sort of, the technology is very magical. Also Star Trek, but they're still more sort of positing something that might happen, whereas Star Wars is definitely starting off saying long time ago and far away, like a fairy tale. And yeah, okay. Well, I have some thoughts on this too because I do like fantasy. I like Dungeons and Dragons, all these sorts of things. Yes, you're exactly right. It allows you to sort of deal with these sort of more primitive things that I think as humans, like hopefully we're trying to leave behind. We're not being very successful at it, but we don't really experience a lot of these things in everyday life now. And I think there is a sort of childish impulse. There's the childish sort of wild animal person is sort of still somewhere in there, and it sort of lets you sort of explore and experience that in different ways. I mean, yes, I suppose it is definitely escapist. You're not sort of dealing with the realities of the world, but that's also partly why I like it. But yes, it's a different thing, and it's understandable why. I don't know. It just depends. I guess it depends on your relationship with reality, really.
So, Jonathan, are you saying that like there's?
Oh, go on.
Well, I was going to say, Jonathan, are you saying that like there's some things that just aren't socially appropriate to express, so you have to express them in a certain context? You have to be like a pirate. You have to be like an old-timey slave, an old-timey ruler. Like
that would explain the popularity of the the Renaissance fair and the Dickens fair. That was the tenet of my argument. Although we were talking about comics, I think so.
Yeah. You grew up in Hogwarts. Go on.
I exactly. No, I grew up. I don't. Chuck will know that there's a TV show called Grange Hill. That was definitely more how I grew up.
Yeah, my school was more like Hogwarts. His was more like Grange Hill. Yes, Grange Hill was pretty good though. I did like to what we did. I did enjoy Grange Hill. It was a very popular show about our local London comprehensive. So it was pretty gritty, and they were dealing with some. It was on children's television hour, or the sort of later part of the children's television hour. On a weekly basis, wasn't it? And all the actors were kids in a high school, and dealing with all the things that high schoolers deal with, really. So it was pretty. Like many British soap operas, they're sort of down and dirty, as opposed to American ones where everybody's sort of glitzy and glamorous. British ones are always everybody's like really, struggling.
Anyway, so I read a lot of comics. And and then one day, I in my head we were on holiday, like my family holiday would be like, parents would drive me and my brother out to some rather unglamorous campsite in Wales or Dorset or something. We would put up a tent in a field, and then the big excursion would be, we'd drive into the little town, and there was nothing to do. You just look at, buildings and things. They would always have a shop with like spinners on, or there'd be like a magazine shop or like a candy store with magazines somewhere. And I remember going through some magazines, and then at the bottom of this pile, I pulled out what was called Ali Sloper magazine. And Ali Sloper is the Hogan's Alley of comic strips as far as the English are concerned, because in the US everyone says the Yellow Kid was the first comic strip, and in Britain everyone says Ali Sloper was the first comic strip, and I'm not sure which one was first, and there's all this argument about what the definition of a comic strip is. Does it have to have the word, blah blah blah. Anyway, I pulled it out, but it was actually the magazine of the British Cartoonist Society, or whatever that's called. And I don't know how it got there. Like, yes, that's Hogan's Alley, but that Hogan's Alley was the name of the Yellow Kid. Yeah, Dale knows more than I do about this.
Dale's the expert, and he'll find out if we don't.
I'm cartoon explaining.
Fact checking.
This was, I looked through, and it was all about the industry of cartooning, and had all these sort of features about cartoonists, and that was the first time I realized that cartooning was a thing that you could do and make a living from, and that Hunt Emerson was in it, and whose work I absolutely adored. And
oh yes, well yes, he's popular here. Dale loves Hunt as well. Yes, definitely, yes.
But from then on in, I would tell everyone, because when you're a kid, everyone says, "Hey, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And then you would say, "I want to be a cartoonist." Well, I really wanted to be a soccer player, but that was never going to work out because.
Okay, so cartoonist was your sensible career.
Back up.
That's your fallback position.
I also really like the idea of being a naturalist, and I used to spend hours drawing cartoons about a naturalist called James McNacker, and he had a big backpack, and he had all these pockets, and I'd do this kind of like exploded. Detailed infographic diagram with what was in every pocket. So he'd like have a magnifying glass, and then he'd have like plaster cast so he can make imprints of the tracks he would find, and then there'd be like all these sample things, and then he had little cases and notebook, and then he'd draw cartoons of all the things that he found. And I was very much in love with that kind of lifestyle, until I realized it would rain a lot and I'd get wet and be killed instantly, probably.
I love the idea that he's plaster of Paris for making footprints. That was sort of an idea they were always trying to encourage us kids in the 70s Britain to make plaster of Paris footprints. I think I tried it. It's like completely difficult and hard.
Before I forget,
plaster of Paris into your pocket.
Before I forget, Hunt Emerson has a new book coming. He just
the 14 Times stuff, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So just in case people didn't know that, get Itsy Bitsy Spider, then get Hunt Emerson.
Yes. Yes. I don't know what's the best what's the best Hunt Emerson to start with? I don't know what's widely available really.
Dante's Inferno.
Dante's Inferno.
Really, I'd go with the Jazz Funnies, or Calculus Cat. Calculus Cat's very good. Firkin the Cat, a little bit more explicit.
Yes. Well, this is a family show here, so yeah.
Well, I think the 14 Times stuff is really good. It's hard to find, but Aliens Ate My Trousers is fun. But it's fascinating that you know his work. Here in the U.S., he's not commonly known.
Yeah, and he's the Robert Crumb of England, isn't he? I mean, he really is. The detail and he's such a cartoonist. Everything he does is so well observed, but well rendered. Not in a realistic way, but in a cartoon way. It's like Wally Wood almost.
Did you see Mad magazine when you were growing up? Did they?
Yes. So that's definitely another thing inside Mad. This book again was one of those spinners in these stores that I would tell you about when I was on my very boring family vacations, and I would look at those and just I couldn't believe, and to this day I still believe that is the greatest achievement of cartoon art that you will ever see, ever, and it will never be surpassed. I cannot believe anyone could ever do that again. And those guys, they weren't paid a lot. Wallywood, had this crappy little house and, miserable lifestyle. They could just sit there smoking all day, and they must have had some sort of mental illness where they could just focus. And...
Yeah, I know. And then I'm looking at these people going, "I want to be just like that."
I mean, it's strange that you say that, Jonathan. That they probably weren't making much money or had a really nice life, but there's this whole thing about what money does to motivation, especially what money does to creative motivation. And it's been written about. There's been at least one popular book about it in the last maybe 10 years. I think it's called Motivation 2.0. But basically, the conclusion that they come to is that incentivizing people with a lot of money when they're creatives does not work the way you think it might work. It's counterproductive, to involve a lot of money in it. Have you guys read any of this stuff?
I can believe it. That's sort of self-evidence by the practice. Creative people don't get paid too much when they get very rich and successful.
I'm not advocating. I'm not advocating that.
It's difficult. Yeah, you're less motivated to do it every day.
Yeah, I'm not saying pay creative people less. I think we should pay them more, and they can maybe they can work that issue out. But it is kind of counterintuitive, and it's mostly with the creative types.
Okay, I'd like to point out that I saw Sergio Aragones from Mad years ago. He lives in Ojai, California, and he was driving an enormous black BMW minivan. So I don't think he's hurting.
No, he's not hurting, that's for sure. Yeah, but I mean, he works very hard, doesn't he? And cranks it out and has a lot of different places. He's also, he was publishing the Weekly World News, Mad Magazine, Grew. What other things he's in? I mean, regularly. I mean, I don't know how he just cranks them out every day.
Paperbacks. Until the 80s, he was doing the paperbacks, and then video games killed them all.
Right.
Yeah, if you look at the arc of his work, it's really gone downhill in the last 20 years. So maybe that's when the money kicked in.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, controversial.
Maybe, I don't know.
So.
I mean, you certainly see that with music.
You wanted to be a cartoonist.
We still haven't got there, have we?
Thanks, Dale.
I spent most of
British
my
camping holidays in the 1970s. I don't know. I'm leaving out my own camping holidays in the 1970s.
So I would spend all of my waking hours avoiding the institutional violence that surrounded me in school and on the streets. I mean, I don't want to over exaggerate, but I don't think I went a single day without being shoved, pushed, punched, kicked. Having my this is a really sad story. I came home one day from school and my ear was bleeding because it had been pulled by somebody. Because I used to have ears like this, and my mum took me straight to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Oh, we can fix that." So thanks to the great National Health Service in Britain, I had my ears pinned back. And I found a note yesterday in my stuff when I was pulling out some stuff. And it was a note from the doctor saying, "Hi, Jonathan. I hope nobody pulls your ears anymore," which was very sweet, but indicative of the time we lived in back then. So I basically retreated into a world of books and drawing, and I read, Asterix and Tintin like everybody, and then a lot of other French books. My dad thought he was French, so he had a lot of French comic books, and I would just, I think it's because the world was such a chaotic and random place that I felt like drawing something and making your own world was my way of sort of dealing with that chaos. So that was probably part of it. And I used to make little comic books. my filing system here. Let's have a look. I started off with this is the research I did for this interview. Let's have a look.
Well, thank you. That's good. That's
Crazy that you still have this.
today.
All right, here we go. Look. So here's a book I did called "Here Come the Beaverback Kids."
Oh, yeah. Hold it very still there. Yeah, that's good. Yes.
Wow.
I don't know.
Excellent.
I'm not quite sure what year this was, but it was, it's a full book. I know my kid always does comics when he draws the cover and then he maybe starts the first page and it never gets finished.
Yes.
But I just for the record, this goes all the way to the back, like the very back page has stuff in it there. It's a good, quite a thick.
And how old were you when you made that one?
I'm not sure. I mean, this would probably be 4, 5, or 6, I think. I've got some that are dated. Here's one that the Disney lawyers would probably take offense at.
The duck else I've ever seen.
The story isn't really anything to do with it. Here's a pretty good Thunderbirds rendering.
Oh yeah. Oh wow. Yes, that's great. Yes.
And then an original Thunderbirds drawing, Thunderbird 6. And then I got bigger. The format got bigger. This is Go-Go magazine.
There's a T-Rex on the cover.
T-Rex with a crown. So my dad used to work in a factory, and he would bring home paper because we were too poor to be able to afford like reams of typing paper. So he'd bring home this paper, and on one side, he had these blueprints for like tool parts. So every other page is the like end of part 1. This was I had this unending supply of paper that we would have to use to draw on, but it always had these things on the back. So so this is when I was 10. I was doing books like this.
Nice.
Yes.
A bit more sort of fantasy driven, and then maybe later.
So you like fantasy when you were 10?
What was that, fantasy, or so much as just crazy stories, weirdness, kind of stuff, right? So then it got onto the this is your classic, probably 11, 12-year-old Whimper Weekly, 10p, and I think I used to draw these, cosmic bleep, hyper.
Wow. Okay.
So jump there.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe there's some missing material. I mean, this is some of the earlier stuff I did as well. I still have this.
There's something about when all those hormones kick in, kids get ultra focused and obsessive.
I feel like this is when it starts going downhill. There, I feel like I lost a lot of creativeness. I'm copying here.
Yes.
Oh, I see. Interesting. Okay.
That's right. So then let's see what else I've got here. So then I started doing. Viz comic came out, and then I was all about Viz for a long time. So then I was doing all this stuff like Ha Ha Herman. Here's a Ha Ha Herman page.
That's your work, or that's Viz?
No, that's my work. This is my work there.
Wow. What year was it? How old were you when you did that?
16 maybe now. 17.
Oh,
yeah.
8. There we go.
I was a little older when Viz came along, but I also was doing some Viz. Viz appropriate.
This is 1991, so this is my early 20s now. This is a comic strip I was doing called Zoo, and it was about I think it's a beaver or a ferret and a giraffe, and all the strips involved him going up a ladder to talk to the giraffe because they were hopelessly.
The beaver is adorable.
Whatever
it is.
And then this is Checkbook Charlie. This was actually published in Boy with the Unlimited Overdraft Facility. That was published in
Checkbook Charlie.
What was the magazine? Had Trunky the Toilet in it. It was his ripoff anyway. A lot of the I didn't like superhero comics at all, but there was a lot of early Fantagraphic stuff that was coming out, and a lot of those graphic novels, and then Love and Rockets and all those things.
Yes, and that's around the time when for Hunt Emerson, I would start seeing him around that time, and when they were putting those things out. Yes,
Mr. Nose Drip. Wait, no, Mr. Soybean, the over-the-top green. A very, very Viz derivative.
Soybean, wow, yeah.
Auntie Freeze.
We didn't get.
Wow, so you're really coming up with a lot of different characters and finishing strips and doing a good job there, making books. All right, but then there's a long way from that to becoming a professional cartoonist.
So
Well,
then,
that's well on the way.
So then, probably around mid-20s, this is after they moved to the US. So then I gave up all pretensions of being a musician. And I started doing this comic strip for a film magazine called Big Shot. It's about a film producer who, you know, and then I just looked at this, realized I used Comic Sans as the font, which is probably the biggest sin of all. But that ran for quite a long time. If it could be a collection of these, there's quite a few.
I know Comic Sans is coming back in again now. The other day I was looking at it and thinking, well, you know what, that's not a bad font. I don't know what's going on. It came right.
No.
Yeah.
Between your childhood and your early 20s, did you go to art school at all?
Yes. Thank you for filling in that gap. So yeah, I did. I went to, I don't want to say I was a good artist, but I was definitely somebody who was pushed towards the art field. And my parents were sort of okay with it because I think my dad said something like, oh yeah, he could be a technical drawer. And my mum was like, oh, that sounds like a proper job.
Yes.
And
thanks
so,
for that.
Craftsman.
I mean, that was I think for somebody growing up in, you know, an industrial grubby armpit of England, that's the best you could sort of hope for, is like a job in a sort of an office in a factory drawing parts, you know, maybe those engine parts at the back, on the back of these bits of paper here, the inspiration.
Yeah, that's not a bad job. I don't know, that's probably a pretty decent job, you know.
And they did do technical drawing at school, and I was absolutely fantastic at it. But you know, I can't imagine that would have been a fulfilling career. So yeah, so off I go to art school, on the premise that I think I got in mostly because I was at that point really into the fashions of the time, of the early 80s, and I kind of got into I was dressing like crazy, outrageous clothing like one did back in the 80s. You know, I had
the new wave stuff.
It was, you know, it was the new romantics. It was the futurist of they said futurist back then. I don't know. Futurist is more of an Italian thing from the 1920s, isn't it? And then I had
about fashion. We don't know.
Yeah.
You had a Devo hat? That's what I'm getting?
No, I didn't copy. That's the thing. I was more into myself as an art piece. I think that was. I mean, it sounds like
Warholish.
I was a ridiculous. I mean, I was so full of myself. I used to make the most horrible things, you know, and the music I was into as well. I mean, so I was in bands already, and just like the idea of being an art piece more than that following the fashions. So, and I would go to a lot of like jumble sales or thrift stores or whatever, and pick up old man clothes, I guess you would call them now, mismatch them, and wear clothes that no one else was wearing. And of course, I'd be picked on even more, but because I was already being picked on, it didn't really make that much difference. But that
now you're sort of doing it deliberately. Like now that being picked on is turning you into an artist. So
yes, I took my
people until they turn into good artists.
I pivoted. But you know, I'd be walking along the street and people would come up and ask to take my photo. And then one time, I got approached, and it was this hair salon, and they wanted me to model for them and stuff. And they would, you know, drive me all over the place, and I'd have to do all these, you know, fashion shows. And I'm a shy guy. I'm not, you know.
Yeah.
It was deeply embarrassing, but you know, it was kind of interesting. So,
but you're enjoying it. You're willfully doing it. You know, you could be still sitting indoors drawing pictures.
Yes,
this paradox
I did divert slightly from the introvert cartoonist with zero social skills.
Yeah.
So
you sort of reinvented yourself really as a teenager then.
I think everyone does to a certain extent. I was not popular. I was not having any fun whatsoever, and I think, you know, on these pre-internet days, I think if you sort of found this arty bohemian crowd, even somewhere like Watford, you know, there was 3 or 4 people like me. we found each other. We had our little, you know, we weren't interested in driving cars. We weren't interested in doing all these things that other people wanted to do, drink beer and stuff. We were interested in all these crazy weird bands and all these little crazy comics and things that we were finding and helping each other, expose each other to these things. So off I go to art school, and I'm pretty sure I got in because I was a guy, and you have to do a foundation course in England, which is like you do everything, and they were like, oh, a guy with some fashion drawings in his notebook, we'll have him for sure. And of course, then as soon as I got in, I lost all interest in doing fashion because it's such a, compared to the music industry, or even compared to the music industry, it's crazy. The music industry is so cutthroat that the fashion industry is probably worse. So I did my foundation course, and then I was doing fine art and got into what's now the University of Brighton, which was then Brighton Polytechnic, and it was a degree in visual and performing arts, and so you did some, and then you either did music, theatre, or dance. And I did music. I was in all these bands, and I had already at that point had a record deal. I was putting out singles, and so that was, probably the best 3 years of my creative life, because living on my own for the first time, and I was earning good bit of money in bands, and I was in like 3 or 4 bands, and just having this creative freedom to do whatever you wanted. So I was still doing comics, but it was mostly video and just crap that I'm really embarrassed about. Luckily pre-internet, so a lot of it's lost in the time, thankfully. So yeah, I came out,
like,
and I was
in the rain.
Came out of art school.
Actually, I think we have a clip.
Well, there are clips, but I'm certainly not going to help you find them. Came out of art school, and then I was in bands as a living for I don't know, 5 years, I think, maybe a little longer.
Oh,
and
okay.
then,
So you were making your living in band for 5 years.
Yeah, traveling around Europe, gigging, and then we do 3 or 4 gigs a week, and because I was in more than one band, there was like a recording band, there was a gigging band, and then all these other little bits and things. And one of the bands was called the Little Green Hondas, and it was a sort of mock surf band with toy instruments. And we did.
That sounds fun.
But it was very flexible, because we could do, you could do a proper gig, or you could do, acoustic gigs. You can busk. You could. We were the British busking champions one year. And got a big trophy.
Wow.
And,
that's impressive.
There's a lot of buskers in Britain. That's a pretty high.
I like this idea. Yeah, I like the idea of the small instruments. It sounds like the setup and the teardowns real quick.
Yes, we had one amp for the bass. That was it. There was no drum set or anything. So,
yeah, I like that setup.
Yeah, they would say, all right, can you set? Well, that's it. We're already done. But it was, we did a dog show. We did garden festivals. We did a boat trip down the Thames, I think. It's very, very easy to do. And I don't think we ever did a gig where we didn't go down well. That was, it was good. And the personalities in the band, everyone in the band was like a really big personality and do fun stuff. That turned out, pretty quickly, but it was a living, plenty of stories, and then so what happened was there was a band called The Residents, who've been going for years. I don't know if you know who they are, but they used to wear big eyeballs on their heads, and I was into this weird, crazy band that did this bizarre music, and I was like, wow, Residents, I love The Residents. And one day a friend of mine who's in that band actually said, well, I've got a friend staying with me, and she's the landlord of one of the residents. And I'm like, what? I couldn't believe it. So I made some excuse to, accidentally walk next to them, when they were hanging out. Oh, hi. And she's like, oh, yeah. One of the residents lives down in my basement. If you're ever in San Francisco, come visit. And then, of course, within a few months, I was in San Francisco visiting. And I just, when I came to the States, I just realized, I felt like I was an outsider in England. and again, I guess I kind of pivoted to making that into a positive thing. But because when you are an actual outsider, and everyone you just kind of get away with a lot of things, as Chuck will be able to tell you too.
Yeah.
You've
got a special license.
like,
At some point you realize that somebody gave you a special license.
I don't know. I embrace the idea of being an outsider, and then San Francisco, because it's also different. I feel every day, even though I've been here more than half my life now, I wake up and I think, oh, it's like being on vacation. I look out the window and the sun's shining, and there's palm trees, and there's the beach and the everything. And I find the US, with all its faults, and believe me, it has major faults. Just being the quirky guy with the excuse this time kind of works for me, and I've always felt much more at home here. And when I go back to England now, it's almost it's good to be out. But
like here, the US, they'll sort of understand all these things you've been telling us you did. People be like, oh yeah, great, well done. In the UK, they'd be like, what do you want to do that for?
Well, this area in particular, the Bay Area in particular is super supportive, especially of artists, I think. I mean, sometimes I think it's too supportive because, if you're in a band or you're doing a project and your friends come out to see you, basically no one's going to tell you you suck, even if you do, which isn't always helpful because you might be under the impression that there's no problem here. But it's super supportive. It's the most supportive. It's not like I've lived all over the US, but I lived in Arizona for 10 years and I grew up in upstate New York and Michigan. And by far, this is the most supportive, like creative community I've ever been in. LA might be a good place too, but LA's uber competitive is my take on it. And also some of my friends' takes that have moved down there. It's a whole different ballgame for music, as you would expect.
Here in the Bay Area, we're a little more, we have, we can, you're sort of not as compelled to be like doing the mainstream or sort of competing in that sort of mainstream thing. We're doing our own crazy things in the Bay Area a lot of the time. And, that's encouraged and supported. So
did you start drawing in San Francisco?
I got to San Francisco, and of course I was illegal. I was I couldn't work legally, but and rather shockingly, back in 1992, I was whisked through the immigration in a rather outrageous way, and I got a job working for a software company doing their graphic design, and so settled very quickly, and did a lot of just like personal cartooning. I did a lot of I was really into back then I guess what would be called graphic narrative, like basically journaling, cartoon journaling. And a lot of it was based on my new life, and that kind of led to me. So and then being in this part of the world and suddenly having probably more disposable income than I'd ever had before. Did a lot of traveling, and then in 2003 I went into the Peace Corps. I'm going to make this quick because I know we're running out of time.
Well, we don't have a particularly hard limit, although I do actually want to
I have to jump out at 10, but
okay.
I mean, I have to jump out at 10, but these guys, I don't know.
We whizzed through an hour quite quickly, didn't we? Yes.
It'll all fall to bits once Chris leaves.
Yes.
So then 2003, I went into the Peace Corps with my partner at the time, who's now my spousal unit. And so we did 2.5 years living in Central America. I came out of Central America, and they give you what's called a readjustment allowance. But we just used it to spend on traveling all the way around all South America and everything. And I just remember sitting in a cafe in Buenos Aires and reading the newspapers and seeing all the cartoonists there and thinking, oh, they're amazing. A lot of it was political, but it was just so, it was there were comic strips, and all the cartoonists seemed to do a comic strip and an editorial cartoon as well. Like they all had this double canon to them. And but they'd so broken away from the formula of comic strips. It really blasted off the throwaway punchline. It was all very a lot of complaints about world cartooning is it's very metaphoric and it's very simplified and it's all wordless and all this stuff. But they've really, certainly in Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay, which we went to, I was like looking at them and just going, wow, these are amazing cartoonists, and they really are exploring the medium in a way in which I've never seen before. So I was like buying all the books I possibly could. My bag was like 3/4 full of books, and I was throwing clothes away to put more books in and stuff. So then we come back to the US, and I'm like, I'm just going to try this 3-pronged approach where I'm going to do a comic strip, I'm going to do editorial cartooning, and I'm going to do like my graphic novel, which I've been working on for years, and then see if any of them work, because I came back and I had no job or anything like that. So I just started doing this comic strip, and I was like, I'm going to draw one a day, and I'm so cheap that I signed up on what was it, Comic Sherpa, I think it was called. It's actually an offshoot of the what was there in the Universal Press Syndicate. And you paid $100 a year, but you would be on this Comic Sherpa website, which was sort of linked to the Go Comics site. And that seemed to be a good motivation for me to make one a day. And I never missed, to this day, I've never missed a comic since I started in 2006.
Yeah, wow, fantastic.
No reruns, no cheating, every single day.
And that Comic Sherpa turned out to be a very, that was, you sort of stepped through the door when it was open, really, like that, because it didn't last very long, Comic Sherpa, but it was offering, a pathway, like a sort of clear pathway into becoming a syndicated cartoonist.
Yes.
You were there with other people.
Yeah,
and
there's quite a few comic strips and cartoons have come from that background. I think most famously Scott Hilburn, who does the Argyle sweater. He started there, and Lucas Turnbloom was there as well, and Justin Thompson, who does Mythical. And there was a lot of podcasts around at the time that I was listening to about like doing cartoons, and David Stanford, who was in charge of Comic Sherpa, was very helpful. He reached out and he was talking to me. He called me up like out of the blue. I'm like, wow,
Wow, yeah.
And then I think within about a month, they had offered me, John Glynn had called me up as well and said, look, we love your strip. Well, we'd be interested in syndicating it. So this is Rabbits Against Magic. So then I was like, oh, great. So then I was basically sitting there, and then basically they did this whole development thing with me, and it kept going on and on and on. And then they kept saying, oh, the bottom's fallen out of the comic strip market. We've been trying to launch all these strips and they're just failing. They're all failing. So that I just kept going. It's changed a bit. It started off much more sort of surreal, and now it's become a lot more topical. But I love doing it. It's kind of therapy for me, and I would go kind of crazy if I wasn't doing it. But then I think about 3 years ago, John called me up and goes, you want to do some work for hire? Cartoonist retiring. Do you want to take over the strip? And I'm like, oh, sure, And that was Alley Oop. And I mean, I couldn't believe it when he said it. And I wasn't allowed to tell anybody for ages. And it was killing me. That's a big deal. That's, that was my real transition from, being a hobbyist cartoonist to being an actual cartoonist. And so then, yeah, I took over. It was, and I'd say this, I'm not a fan of legacy strips. I think they use up space on the paper that should be given to young, fresh talent to come through. I think they are usually awful and, generally speaking, stagnant and repetitive. I don't like the idea of somebody taking over a strip. I don't want my kid to take over my strip. I'm glad. A lot of my favorite strips do not allow their kids to take them over. Or anyone to take over. Pogo was continued a little bit longer by some other artists, but they quickly realized that was a mistake.
Yeah, that's so much about the art and the creator, isn't it? And well, Peanuts as well. I know you're a massive Peanuts fan. You know, you grew up with that as well, and yeah, I know they keep that going. You know, they've got the Peanuts studio. They sort of make new product. They don't do the strip, but they're still.
That's the thing. Yeah, they don't do the
Yes.
strip. So, you know, as a fan of comics, and you know, I'm a big fan of Value, and I knew what it was, and I respected the creators that they used along the line, and to a certain extent I feel bad for the longtime readers who, I think, when they found out that somebody else was going to take over, because it had been in decline for a long time, for whatever reason, they thought that maybe somebody was going to take it over and it was going to go back to being the 1930s adventure strip that they really wanted to read and they enjoyed reading. And the Syndicate was very clear that wasn't going to be what we were doing. We were going to be doing something new and interesting, and it was going to be for a younger audience, and we needed to get people back on board. And they'd done the same thing with Nancy, and they'd done the same thing with Mark Trail.
Popeye.
Popeye, did you say?
Yes, they've had different artists for Popeye and gone in different directions.
I think it said I thought no, Popeye. Yes, Popeye.
No,
yeah.
You know, the sailor.
Yeah, the Bobby London iteration of Popeye was absolutely fantastic. I'll just say that. And I love Popeye, actually. I remember reading that as a kid, and certainly the old Thimble Theatre stuff I absolutely adore.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, there's been a lot of Popeye artists. So yeah, it was very difficult because I knew there would be a lot of pushback, and you know, I like to think I'm trying as hard as I can to balance this tightrope between being respectful of what Alley was and then moving it forward into a newer era of you know, I mean, again, I'm not the writer, I'm just the artist, but I think it's become a new thing that will be in time heralded. Hopefully.
That must be very exciting to be working on something with a writer that you sort of respect and admire, and you know, working on a property that's been around for so long, but it's sort of relatively free for you to, you know, make your own mark on it. You know,
they were very open about it. They're like, you know, as long as the characters are vaguely recognizable, you can do whatever you want to them. And I did start off trying to do it in a sort of Rabbits Against Magic style, and quickly realized that was probably not the best thing to do. It would have been a huge time saver if I had done it. But,
hey, I have to jump off, you guys. So thank you so much, Jonathan.
It's great meeting you.
And Dale and Chuck. I have another meeting with my band. So bye, you guys. Carry on.
We'll see you next time, Chris. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Okay. Bye.
Hey, Chris.
Bye. All right.
Yes.
Now we're down to 3.
I've probably got to go about 10 to. I've got a dentist appointment today. I suddenly realized. Okay.
All right. So I don't know if you can see this. This is like early Alley stuff.
Ooh, that's not coming through very clear.
And then they just said there's nothing written, so they're just like, draw 2 weeks worth of strips. So then I just messing around, just drawing, you know, just blank.
This is lovely.
Thank you.
What were you doing? They said draw 2 weeks worth of strips, but without any words in.
Well, they didn't give me any scripts, so I just started drawing cavemen and bits, you know.
Putting in empty balloons.
Practicing. I think they just wanted to make sure I could draw something that looked vaguely like alley-oop, you know. So then.
Yeah. Okay. So those were not used, like nobody went retroactively put some words in them or anything. That was just.
And I don't know what I did, but then one of them, I can't find the one I did now. Or maybe it was this one. One of them, John was like, the editor was like, oh yeah, that's the one. And I don't think I did it any differently from any of the others, but I guess that just meant it was like, okay, excuse me, okay to go. And then Joey came in and she sent me a bunch of scripts, and the first thing that she had characters doing was going back to the 80s, which was a challenge, partly because the Ali physique is very similar to the Popeye physique in that he's got very thick forearms
yes.
and ridiculously thick what's that part of the body? But it's the
Yes.
opposite of an actual human.
Yeah.
And then the 80s fashions are the opposite of that. They're very much a thick shoulder pad. So like alley-oop wearing baggy pants would basically it would level out the leg, so it'd just be like a tube or something, you know. And
Yes. Yeah.
and so I had to be very creative with that kind of. The challenge of alley-oop is very much about doing a lot of research, because the team is going backwards and forwards in time. So there's all these different costume changes. Like they go to ancient Greece, they go to thankfully they go to a lot of made up places like the future or distant planets or something, where you can kind of invent clothes. But yeah, there's the Boston Tea Party was quite challenging. The hardest thing I've ever had to draw was she had alley-oop go down Lombard Street because they were in San Francisco.
Oh God.
And
The windiest street in the world for anyone who
the
doesn't
second
know.
cricketed street in the world, actually. There's another one that no one knows about. This
yes, the
No, we
secret
all
one
know
in
Wall
Cherry
Street.
Hill, yes.
Vermont Street.
Yes.
So anyway, so alley-oop didn't like going down the crooked street, so he got a tractor and he drove straight down the hill. So I had to draw a panel with Lombard Street and alley-oop driving a tractor down the middle, or like a backhoe. What is it called with the scoop?
Yeah, backhoe.
Bulldozer.
Bulldozer. There you go. He bulldozed a straight. he fixed Lombard Street basically. So to draw Lombard Street and the bulldoze tracks in one panel of a comic strip, you know, compared to say like a Hagar strip or a
yeah. Right now you're wishing you had done a cut and paste style. Yeah.
You know, I literally drove over and I realized you can't see Lombard Street unless you're in a drone, for example, or a plane looking down on it. Otherwise you just don't see the curve so much. It's like anyway, it sort of worked. Nobody complained.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, right.
What
Yes,
is
you're the only one who's worrying about it.
What is your day like for doing these strips? I mean, how much time do you spend on the strip? How much time do you spend on searching for reference material? Could you describe your day?
Yeah, so I get a 2 or 3 week lead from Joey when she sends the scripts over. So I get a head start on if they're going to be somewhere where I need to do any research. Luckily, Ali gets away most of the time wearing these little like animal fur pants, and everything else is just this crazy, weird physique torso thing, homoerotic drawing. And it's these weird things you notice when because I look through a lot of old alley-oop strips as well, but they always try and avoid drawing the feet a lot. They always have this grass growing up so you don't see the feet. But I draw a lot of feet. So my day is basically based around caring for my kids. So I get the kid up, get the kid to school, and I have to pick the kid up again and then deal with him and then put the kid to bed. So in between all that stuff, well, I'm playing with the kid, entertaining the kid, feeding the kid, all that stuff.
Yes. Well,
So
now he's 10, though, that starts to fade off.
3 chunks. I get a bit of the morning, a bit of the afternoon, and then after he's gone to bed. So after he's gone to bed, generally speaking, that's Rabbit's time. But other than that, it's more like I don't have set times. I don't like pencil at one time and ink. It's just all a scramble to get it all done. And it's really my process is I need to have something on, either music. I do have a movie on sometimes with the director commentary. So a movie I know, so I'm just listening to the commentary and I can occasionally look up, oh yeah, that's that bit they're talking about, blah blah blah. It's something that keeps me going, or podcasts or something.
Oh, on that line, I recently discovered Netflix with audio description enabled is quite good for like a lot of documentaries and things. So they'll tell you what you're looking at, so you don't have to be looking at it. Yeah.
Very good. Thanks for that.
The director, John Borman, his films like Excalibur and Zardoz have excellent director commentaries.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Well, Dale's a big fan of Zardoz, yeah.
I'm not a big fan of fantasy. That's the thing.
Yeah, stay away from Zardoz. It's dangerous.
No.
It's very dangerous.
No, I'm more of a late 50s, all through the 60s and early 70s. That's my era for movies, for sure. But yeah, it's mostly. So I have to do the coloring as well. I know a lot of cartoonists, comic strip cartoonists, they can just hand off their inks and then somebody else colors them. But somehow these days technology means that most cartoonists like me have to do the coloring too, and the coloring is frustratingly long, even with Clip Studio.
But I find coloring is the most mindless part. That's when you really can put on an audiobook or something and just sort of be zoned out for me.
I feel like coloring is so close, and yet it's the least. You're right. I mean, you could be doing other things when you're coloring, but it has to be done, and it has to be done correctly, I suppose.
Yeah. No, I feel like I love to do it, but it's like it's the bit I need to think about the least. My mind can be very sort of disengaged while I'm coloring, especially if it's like a cartoon. Like it's different from painting, where you're sort of actually trying to, define things a lot. Well, when you're coloring a cartoon, the lines are all sort of set, so there's less decisions to be made, or like the easier, they're more about just value than anything. Yeah.
Right.
Are you using the stock tools in Clip Studio Paint for your coloring?
Him?
Me?
No, I'm referring. I was you.
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah, you. I'm not using Clip Studio Paint. Hang on, shut the door.
Well, I'm just thinking about if I was just thinking I shouldn't be complaining, because looking at one of Chuck's pieces, I mean, I would be killed instantly if I had to do something like that. I would die on the spot. I mean, Alley-Oop's not a complicated coloring job, really. It is complicated because I do backgrounds. A lot of comic strips just don't do backgrounds at all. They're just they're very.
Yes.
I do go above and beyond with my backgrounds.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I mean, you're sort of working like an old school cartoonist. You still had.
What I was getting to is Clip Studio Paint by Celsius. They have tools you can download from their website, and they have some more advanced coloring tools if you've never explored those.
Okay, well, I will explore them.
Yeah, I should take a leaf out of your book there too, Dale. I know I've got a bunch of things I need to color, so I don't know. When I was doing all those watercolors last
If
year,
you ever want to talk about the software offline via Facebook, let me know, and I might be able to point you towards some tools that I've found.
Okay, I mean, I'm happy with what I have, which is basically a bucket and that closed gap feature.
Okay,
and
well,
just being able to fill. I mean, there used to be I used to use a thing where it would randomly fill in blocks.
Yes.
I forget what it was. It wasn't Clip Studio, but it was
Photoshop B flat. That's what Chuck uses.
Yes. Beepelt, Multifill, and Flatten Pro, 2 plugins.
Okay.
Multifill randomly fills, and then Flatten.
It would make everything a color, and then you could just easily just fill in.
Yeah, I find that really helpful for the search and finds, because then I do all the hair one color and all the faces one color, and then I can sort of select them and do all skin and hair, and then clothes, because of the multi-fill, clothes takes a lot of the thinking out of doing clothes. And just all the little things, the colors. I have a palette, so all my palettes sort of thrown on the scene. And, then I just sit there all day with a good, nice cup of tea and a good audio book, and off I go. Yeah.
Yerba mate. Yeah.
When you finish a strip, now are you just emailing the file or using Dropbox to send that to the Syndicate?
That's an easy question to answer. Not a very interesting answer though. It's I send it. I make a JPEG, send it to we have 2 editors, and they both come back with input. Normally there's no changes, maybe a small typo or something. Occasionally, I think maybe 4 or 5 times I've had to redraw a panel. There was one time somebody was having an anal exam, was bending over, the arm disappeared, which was quite funny. Another time, I think a cave looks like a butthole. That was another one we had to redo. But yeah, once the editor says fine, then you just upload, and it's they usually have an FTP site that you can upload to.
Okay.
But they also wanted. I really wanted to do a hand font when I started, and they sort of said, look, do you use an actual font, because we have to change it. We have to make different languages, different language versions. And then they wanted like an open file that they could go in, and there's layers. You have to have. The other thing people don't know about syndication format cartoons is that you can't use anti-alias, which is horrible, because if you look at an actual file, it doesn't have that nice, clean, smooth lines that look nice on a screen. I mean, they look great in the newspaper because that's what it's yes or no on that black layer. So it's horrible. So when you go in and you zoom in and do little fine details, it's all about like you're messing with pixels, and it feels like that's so antiquated in this day and age to be able to do that.
Yeah. Oh, so you're talking about like the black and white being a bit mapped.
Yes.
Like,
so
yeah,
the file I
know,
create has two layers. Well, actually
yes.
has two art layers, and then all the font layers. And there's a black layer that's just black on
Yes.
transparent, and it sits on top of the color layer. So the color's underneath. So you can go underneath. You have to go underneath that black. So when they print it, they normally print the color, and then the black goes on top.
Yes, I tend to sort of work like that as well, actually, I found, because certainly with some of my sort of self-published things, they don't want too heavy of an ink limit. So I just kind of work that way anyway. So yes, and lately, yes, I have been going just sort of fully bit mapping my black layer. I mean, I sort of, I felt like that way, but then I think it was actually, I was looking at some Brian Bolland work, and I realized that, he was doing that as well. And, his work always looks so clean. My problem is, I'm always trying to achieve a clean look. I don't know why. I mean, I get a good look, but I think, trying to get something very clean is very hard for me. I always end up with a sort of kind of more rough sort of look, I suppose, in one way or another. So, yeah, I don't know. Yes, it's interesting, but yes, it's so small when it's printed. You're not going to see those pixels. But yes,
absolutely. But I think, the anal obsessive in me, or the compulsive,
yes,
just wants to see something good on the screen before I send it off, and then as soon as you zoom in, to any extent, you start seeing these little jaggers.
Yes.
I hear all these stories about cartoonists having to rush off to the airport, to catch the last FedEx to send off these tubes to their editors every week because they're so close to deadline. And I think we've got it easy with these, computers these days, so we shouldn't complain.
Yes. Have you thought about going portable, or do you like working on a large Cintiq?
Well, I do have a backup system, because when I did go digital, I realized there was no going back. And then I panicked because I know the day's going to come when the Cintiq doesn't work, and then you're stuck. So I do have a backup. They were selling, I think Wacom was selling a whole bunch of cheapo, the smaller ones on eBay. There are refurbished ones that I guess had been returned. So and it was like $400, and I was like, oh, you can't go wrong with that. So I got a backup one, and then if we ever go on vacation, it's the size of a laptop. You can just take it all along with all the cables that go with it. Just incredible. They're bigger than the actual unit itself. The power supplies and.
Yes, well, Douglas Adams had a theory about the cables, and that's where these companies make their real money.
It is.
Yes.
The markup on I used to sell computers. The computers, we had practically no profit margin. It was selling the cables, and you would usually get a free printer. So selling the ink and the paper, that's where all of our profit came from.
Yes, printer ink's one of the most precious liquids on earth, apparently, in terms of drop for drop value. And I worked at Monster Cable for a little while. They're in the Bay Area, like when I was doing graphic design work and stuff. And yeah, they were quite a nice company to work for. But yeah, they were massively engineering the cables. There was a lot of profit in those, I think.
Yeah, now everyone just goes to Central Computers and buys these cheap cables imported from Timbuktu or wherever.
Yeah, no, but Monster's like, if you spent thousands and thousands of dollars on your stereo, you're not going to begrudge spending $100 on a cable.
Well, don't they make them proprietary now, so they don't work unless you buy the official cables?
Well, I haven't heard about that.
I buy cheap junk cables. I have a box somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, Monster would just, they would just use the premium products. They had a little engineering lab there.
They look great. Monster cables looked like good cables.
Yeah, they looked like good cables. They felt like good cables, and they ensured you that they were good cables. But you're talking about small amounts of difference. But yeah, if you paid a huge amount for your stereo, then why risk losing all that sound quality with a cheap cable when you can use a nice expensive Monster cable?
Yeah, but now we all listen to crappy music on our iPhones or our smartphones.
All right.
I don't even own a stereo anymore. I don't even own a TV anymore.
Blimey.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Okay. So you just have your little device that plays.
Oh, nice.
Wait, he's got a wax. He's going to come out with a wax cylinder next. Yeah.
You're in San Francisco, so are you going to Amoeba Records or?
Amoeba doesn't have a great selection of 78s. There's a place called John's Records on, I want to say Divisadero. It's in the Lower Haight. It has a fantastic selection of 78s. And I'm sitting next to literally 500 78s. But it's eBay these days. Once you get to a point where you just don't want any 78, you want specific stuff. The internet unfortunately has destroyed the collections of. At least I'm with you guys. I'm sure it's the same thing. Like, I used to love the hunt. I used to love going into old bookstores and finding finding things that I didn't even know existed. Wow, that's a and it might not have been the greatest thing, but just the hunt itself and the surprise and the finding and the discovery part was such a huge thing. And then once the internet came along and you realize what there was, you either got put off because there was too many things, or you realized that of the values of things, or things became more expensive, or initially eBay was super cheap and you could find all these things that you've been looking for years, and suddenly they were available and you could get them very quickly. And then the fun went out of it too because it was too easy.
Yeah.
Yes, it's too easy, and then you end up and I'm ending up with sort of long wish lists of all these things that I can't afford right now, but that I've had, and then once those lists get so big, you're like, well, what's the point?
I worked in retail for years, and retail is entertainment. It isn't about going and buying things, and I think that's something, unfortunately, that we're losing, is the entertainment and the exercise of going out shopping and browsing. Now, you're up in San Francisco. Are there any haunts as a cartoonist you go to? A friend of mine saying hi. Do you hit the comic book stores in San Francisco and Berkeley, or any bookshops that you like? Where do you hunt still?
Well, I haven't left the house for 2 years.
Okay.
Because there's a plague out there. I'm petrified of
He's
getting
got enough
plague.
books. He's got enough books in his own library. He spends all his time hunting for that.
I do have a substantial library of things like I never tire of. And I'm realizing that I love social distancing. I'm not necessarily a great person. I can't believe as a younger person that I would go to clubs, and I didn't drink even back then, and I would go and you'd just scream at somebody over the music for 3 hours and go home, and then that was called a good time.
Yeah.
And
that's what it's all about.
I've also discovered that I enjoy people at a distance. I like writing to people. I mean, I have people I write to every day on email, and I would consider them my best friends, and I haven't seen them for 10 years, 15 years. But that's because I'm antisocial, and to paraphrase George Carlin, the average American is pretty stupid, and that means that half of them are even more dumb.
Yes. Remember that the average think how stupid the average American is, and then remember that half of them are stupider than that.
That's the quote. Yeah.
Or you can just say the average person. You don't need to make it about Americans. I've decided I'm not holding with any of this nationalist nonsense. I've decided that's all just stuff that people who want us to kill each other for their profit, use those things to stir us up, and
I'm the only American here in a conversation with two Brits.
Yeah. I feel like, okay, so I would say that I feel like most people in the world are good people. I've been fortunate enough to travel a lot, and I've also lived in places where the system is not based on greed and self-interest like it is here. And there's something about a country, I don't know whether it's the poverty or the communal necessity of having to help each other out, that makes people become more what I would call human, that they're more understanding, they're more sympathetic. And once you get, it's the difference between Europe and, like Spain, for example, and Mexico. They're two countries, they both speak the same language. But in Mexico, you can talk to anybody, you can hang out with them, you can, it's very much more of a thing. But you go to Spain, it's like everyone's, what are you talking to me for? What do you want? And so I'm definitely not picking on Americans. I am an American citizen, and so just for the record, it's the disparity of wealth that I find absolutely shocking, and I think money does corrupt, and people either don't have enough or they have way too much. That's my philosophy.
Yes, I mean, my current theory though is really, science has shown that one person out of 100, scores high on this lack of scores high on a lack of empathy. They're a sociopath, or actually it's described as a psychopath, but people don't really, that term's more difficult for people. But the trouble is that they don't, they don't care. 99% of the rest, they'll have us thinking that we're all like them, but we're not. 99% of us are not like that. But the thing is, they'll very quickly corrupt a more utopian sort of system like communism. Because they don't have a mechanism built in. Capitalism has the competition instinct built in. All right, so it's somewhat more resistant to their sort of corrupting influence. Not that they don't still have it, but it's still that's why it sort of seems to be the most effective system, even if it's not a great system. These other systems, which seem great and should work, but they don't, because they get corrupted by these people. And always it's these same people, like Putin, whoever it is, big scale, small scale, they're high percentage of the jail prison population. But also when you look at CEOs, then you've got 1 in 25. But that's still 96% of them aren't. But, I think they're the ones, they're the ones that will make us sort of kill each other for, our differences, and they always want everybody to be seeing everything, the same way. It's very important that, when they've got their little cult going, whatever, that you're not allowed to look outside of that at all. And they get you to put it, you can put on a uniform, and then it'll be easier for you to go kill for them. And then once you kill for them, unless you two are a sociopath, you'll then have to sort of morally justify what you did, which is very hard, unless the whole society is sort of supporting you in that. And you'll get the PTSD, but these people won't. And I don't know, I think they've sort of been behind really a lot of history, most of everything, really. But it is a problem that we need to sort of recognize and be aware of, I think.
Yeah, well, I feel like, you went a long way there from distribution of wealth to killing. That's kind of.
Well, it's just about the sort of a system. Why a system gets corrupted.
When you're young, everyone says, "Oh, don't worry. When you're you might be left leaning now, but when you hit 30, when you hit middle age, you'll become a conservative just like everybody else." And I found that to be the absolute opposite. I'm much more annoyed and irritated now than I ever was. Much more motivated to try and do something about it. But the irony is, or the conundrum is, I feel like if we were in a socialist country, our little exploits at trying to make comics or be amusing stuff would be controlled by the state, and we would have no say. Yes. We'd be powerless to really even do our own little home projects, and our little world would be completely based on oppression by the powers that be, and we would probably end up being much more sympathetic towards the idea of independence and free expression.
Definitely. I mean, yes. I mean, like comic is yes, ultimate sort of free expression. We're like, you know, I mean, yeah, my books they're you know probably not allowed in the Islamic world. I did get asked to do some search scene set at Mecca by some Islamic scholars at one point. I'm like, I'm not doing that because I'm probably if I say yes, I'm going to get an automatic fatwa issued against me. You know, because thing is, these things are very powerful. I mean, comic images they're so simple, and you don't need to be able to read. You can look at it, you know, and you can mock the leader, and it's sort of you know. It's giving you quite a wide perspective, or it's this idea of perspective. You know, people who want to control you just want you to see through one eye, you know, and then they can tell you that the tree's growing out of the man's head. You know, when you open your other eye, you see all the trees 50 yards behind the man. Do you know what I mean? Perspective. And the further apart and bigger and more eyes that you have, the better you can somewhat make out what's really going on, because none of us can really figure that out. You know, like that's just you know that you can't figure out everything, but you know, comics have quite a powerful way of putting these strong ideas of the mind, you know, to educate and entertain, but you know, and possibly be used for evil. But it's hard to control a cartoonist, you know. They're not motivated by money, you know.
So ask the people who work at Charlie Hebdo, see what they say.
Yeah, well, okay, yes, so yes, exactly. So they came and you know, blew up, attacked the Charlie Hebdo. But did that stop them? I don't know. Didn't that just, you know, make them worse?
Speaking of Charlie Hebdo, and speaking of being more liberal now and the importance of cartoons, what cartoons are you looking at now? Do you look at other cartoonists? Like, for example, I read The Nib. I also read the cartoons in the New Yorker. What other cartoonists interest you that you're following now?
I love the medium of editorial cartooning. I would love to do editorial cartooning. I think Rabbits and Its Magic is essentially an editorial cartoon most days. I was a big fan of Tom Towles before he retired a couple of years ago. I too am a faithful subscriber to the Nib. I've tried a few times to get into the Nib. I've bribed Matt Wars many times, even offering my own human child. Who once we were at the Sacramento Bee, which is a newspaper in Sacramento, and I was there with my kid, and Matt was there with his newborn kid, and we were locked out the building. We couldn't get in, and all the other cartoonists were inside, and no one was answering the doorbell. But you could get in through the scanner, because the scanner kind of went from outside to inside. So I got my kid to crawl through the scanner, open the door from the inside. That's the last time I saw Matt Bors, editor of the Nib. Yeah, the Nib's doing great stuff. I love the Nib. I kind of wish it would expand a bit more, so that it's not the same 7 people whose work I love. You know, Jen Sorensen, awesome, wonderful person, brilliant cartoonist. Yes. And I do love Dan, his name's Tom Tomorrow professionally, Dan Perkins. His stuff, This Modern World, it's always on the money. And Lloyd Dangle, no longer doing his strip, but I love Lloyd Dangle's work. He used to do one called Trouble Town.
Yes.
But yeah, the New Yorker has a very specific type of humor, and I read it every week religiously and adore it. And I love the history of the New Yorker almost obsessively for many reasons. I'm a huge fan of S.J. Perelman's writing. I think he's probably the most underrated writer of all time, and I never understand why he's not more heralded. I think his writing is just a cut above everybody else's in terms of humor and just crispness of prose. What else do I like? I'm big into my dream is to retire and just sketch for the rest of my life. I like a lot of artists that just kind of do, I wouldn't say cartoony sketches, but they have a style of sketch that is not like photorealistic sketching. Just has loads of personality, and it's such a nice lifestyle to imagine that you could just travel the world and sit in cafes and draw color and sit on a beach, or sit in wherever, and just that could be your life. That to me seems like the next step.
Okay.
That sounds good. All right, guys, I think I'm going to have to call it there. That sounds like a good
Right.
note to end on. We could probably go on talking forever. And I'm sure we'll do it again sometime. And hopefully, I'll see you in real life soon, Jonathan. Once the pandemic's properly over. I don't know. It's coming back.
It was a pleasure to meet you.
Yes, great to meet you too, Dale.
Yes, thank you, Dale, for joining us again and asking some useful questions that I probably wouldn't have thought of. And yeah, Jonathan, awesome. Yeah, if you want to check out Jonathan's work, where's the best place to go?
GoComics.com has full archives of all my work.
All right. Go Comics. And yes, you can find him easily enough. Rabbits, if you search Rabbits Against Magic, Alley Oop comic strip will come up pretty quickly. And yes, so that's Lemon. All right, so thank you, everybody. I'm going to play the theme music, and I'll be back tomorrow with cartoonist Travis Hanson talking about his strip Life of the Party, which will all be about fantasy cartoons. So yes, we'll be talking more about that. All right, bye.
Hey guys, take care.
Bye.
I'm just going up this water spout, y'all. Y'all, hope it don't
The
rain.
itsy bitsy spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. So the itsy bitsy spider climbed up the spout again.
I'm just going up this water spout, y'all. Hope it don't rain. I'm an itsy bitsy spider. I'm also a good hider. Y'all ain't gonna find me.
The itsy bitsy spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. So the itsy bitsy spider climbed up the spout again.
Going up this,
Up the spout again.
going up this.
Up the spout again.